I look at a world where the politicians to stay in office, I don't care which party or what country, want to divide us all, divide and conquer. I'm hoping in the second act advantage, people will learn how to find others that are trying to make the world better. We'll start a second act society and we can start building back that humanity and connection, because that's the one thing that AI will never do. It doesn't have the creativity. It doesn't have the collaboration. It can't go to the farmer's market and talk about how do we make the world better and go for a walk in a park. I mean, those are the moments that matter. And we need to get more of them into our lives.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of What If with Leslie Grandy. We talk a lot about disruption in business because every day we witness markets being disrupted, industries being disrupted, and business models being disrupted. But the disruption that's coming for most of us isn't about market share or competitive positioning. It's more personal than that. It's about identity and what we do with the structures that gave our lives shape, like our titles, our industries, and our daily routines, change all at once. One of the reasons I chose What If as a podcast name is that it implies a particular orientation toward possibility, toward reframing, and toward asking better questions rather than accepting default answers. Curiosity and agency tie directly into that orientation. Curiosity describes the what-if impulse, while agency provides the motivation to act on it. We're going to be talking a lot about curiosity and agency today because both of these traits are essential for navigating your second act. When our jobs no longer define us, how do we define purpose? How do we stay relevant? How do we find meaning when we no longer go to work or bring home a paycheck? This is the moment in life where curiosity and self-awareness become survival skills. You need the willingness to ask what if, even when the answer is uncomfortable, and to look honestly at what you can do differently and then demonstrate the agency to actually do it. Because if you can't see yourself clearly, you can't reimagine yourself. And reimagining yourself, it turns out, might be the most important creative act of this moment. Whether you're navigating a career shift or stepping away from full-time work, this conversation matters. The job market is shifting beneath us, and the last of the baby boomers will reach retirement age within the next 4 years. The scale of this transition is enormous. My guest today, Jay Samit, has thought harder than almost anyone about how individuals navigate this particular inflection point. He has spent his career not just surviving disruption, but running toward it. He has insatiable curiosity and an unending belief in ordinary humans' capacity to change the world. He believes the traditional model of retirement is ready for a disruptor like him, and he'll explain why his AI avatar, Digital Jay, might be the perfect partner to help you find your own second act advantage. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to What If with Leslie Grandy. My guest today is Jay Samit. Jay's an international best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, and former independent vice chairman of Deloitte Digital. Jay has pioneered breakthrough technologies used by billions of consumers and helped grow companies like LinkedIn, Sony, and Universal Studios. His third and latest book, which will be released in early May, is called The Second Act Advantage: Monetize Your Wisdom, Master Longevity, and Build an Unforgettable Legacy. Jay is also a sought-after keynote speaker and has advised Fortune 500 companies and raised hundreds of millions of dollars for startups. But most interesting to me is that he launched his career as an artist when his solo show, America Disrupted, debuted in 2020 at the Richard Tattinger Gallery in New York. His provocative paintings use a pop culture lens to convey the impact of artificial intelligence and technology on our lives. I've known Jay for many years and was fortunate to have interviewed him for my book, Creative Velocity. So I'm really excited about this conversation today. Welcome to the podcast, Jay.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So let's get started with why you decided to write your latest book. And what did you start to see that made you think that the traditional idea of retirement needed to be disrupted?
So two things. For the past 6 years, I was chairman of one of the public AI companies. I understand the impact of this technology and the size of it. My first book over a decade ago, I said half of all jobs will disappear. when I spoke at Davos, the World Economic Forum, the speaker ahead of me was the head of the International Monetary Fund. And she said a third of all jobs will disappear in the next couple of years. So that isn't a lunatic. That is somebody that has the data. So I'm looking at the baby boomers, the largest generation, are all at the peak retirement, 50% of whom have no life savings. Most Americans have a negative net worth. And now we're going to take away a third of the jobs. What does that do for the individual, for society, for walking down the street? And this is global. This is affecting everywhere. So I can't solve what's happening, but the tool is agnostic. You can use it to make your life better, or it can run you over. So as all my books in disruption isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you respond. So I wanted to arm people and especially talk to the last non-native digital generation that will ever be on this planet, how these tools can help you live longer, live healthier, and most importantly, how to have the secret to longevity, which is purpose. So if you have purpose, we learned about the blue zones and they studied the diet and the atmosphere, and they missed the whole point. These were people that what the Japanese called ikigai, a reason to get out of bed. So the pandemic made us all not have much human interaction. Working remotely took it away, using apps to do our shopping and everything. And we've lost that connection to each other. So if I can show people how to bring that back, how to do those tools, how to make a living, but more importantly, if money isn't an object, how you can use that wisdom that you got with the gray hair, and how you can solve real world problems and make the place better. So I felt a moral obligation. I didn't want to go through, as you know, the work of marketing a book, but the response has been tremendous because people are starting to feel the pain, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, I totally see that. When I started thinking about my own retirement horizon about 5 years ago, I found this one book that was called Retiring. Your next chapter is more than money. And it was written by Senator Ted Kaufman. And what stayed with me that I hadn't thought about up until that point was the required mindset shift I would need to do when I'm suddenly setting my own goals, deciding how I spend my time, who I spend it with, and, how I differentiate my days when weekdays look like weekends. And so I kind of think that transition isn't easy for a lot of people, intellectually or emotionally, especially not if you're a high performer. So where should someone start to think about preparing for that kind of transformation?
So let's start where most people do. Most people's retirement are a 1 week plan. Oh, I've always wanted to see Paris or sort the stamp collection or something else. And then deer in the headlines. Well, let me tell you what happens. Most people, if you ever went to a party in your entire life, somebody asks you, what do you do? So people's identity are wrapped up in their job. Their social networking is through their job. Their self-esteem and place in society in their mind is, and suddenly you take all that away. In the first 12 months, you will lose 30% of your short-term memory. So people that ask the question, why am I here, are not doing it for the existential. They walk into the living room and they go, why am I here? I mean, you really lose your mind. Second thing that research has shown, and this is most footnotes in any of my book, I mean, hundreds of them, is we don't age and then become decrepit and fall apart and die. We age and fall apart because we stop doing, stop thinking, stop using our minds, stop being active, stop having that purpose that we talked about. So most of what we associate with aging and health span, getting less healthy, has nothing to do with years on the planet. So if you can change that trajectory, and let's also talk about that because so many jobs are going and every career, whether by choice or circumstance, will be disrupted this time. It doesn't just affect people that are 60. If you were in the Olympics and from 8 years old, you were training, and you come in 2/100ths of a second later and you're number 4, your career's over at 20. If you're in pro sports at 30, or if you're a cop after your 20 years. So what do? Our educational system trained you to be a good employee and sit in your little thing and follow instructions. That era is gone. The big corporate jobs are gone. Your biggest companies laying off tens of thousands of workers that are office people making 6 digits or 7 digits. Everybody was told for the past decade, learn to code, get a STEM education. There's no more coding. AI can just do it. I think people need a little nudge. And in this time around on the book, I also, because I've heard from readers in 140 countries of my other books, are in over a dozen languages. And what I realize is there's 2 problems with the book, every book. The first is the second it hits paper, it's out of date. The world keeps on moving, but your book is locked in time. But the other one was even more important. I, as an author, have to make the assumption, where are you in your journey? Are you 40 planning for retirement? Or are you 50 and you just got pushed out the door because it's easier to hire cheaper people that are younger? Whatever the thing is, are you living in the States? Are you wealthy and want to figure out how to set up a nonprofit and solve a world problem? Or are you just making ends meet and want to explore, maybe I could have a richer life living in Costa Rica, or how do I do these things? So the second act advantage comes, first book to do this, with a custom built AI based on all my books, all my podcasts, all my speeches, all my columns for Fortune and Wall Street Journal. So it's your own personal mentor that you can ask without embarrassment, in complete privacy. I'm not grabbing any data or doing anything. So you can build out a second act. And if new tools come along or new things, I'm constantly educating as I get educated, the tool. So you've got this, what I call digital J. And to tell you how amazing AI is on the positive, I made the press this time around interview digital J instead of real J. Not out of arrogance, out of digital J is a lot smarter. Because every time I would ask a typical question, I look at the answer and go, oh my God, that's a great answer. Why did I think of that? Now, yes, maybe I did think of pieces of it over 40 years, but I don't remember every stat, every anecdote, every solution. But digital J does. And now you can get them free with the book.
So this is kind of a fascinating area for me, because I think that a lot of people who are retired aren't necessarily gravitating towards more technology and tend to maybe be less adaptive, right? Because they've gotten where they've gotten through experience and wisdom. And so they're maybe not seeing the opportunity that a digital J could provide them. How do you get those people over the hurdle that they have what they need to go into retirement, and that they may still need to learn, right, how to adapt to what retirement means today?
So you know this, but for your audience, I'm the original early adopter. I started on the internet in 78. There were less than 100 people, okay? And the world came to where I was standing. It's not like I'm a genius. I'm a moron. I'm proof that anybody can succeed. But I lived through the generation of building my businesses and creating the first social network a decade before Facebook, and the first online auction that turned into eBay, and helping Reed launch LinkedIn, and all these things we take for granted. I remember when everybody said, that's the dumbest idea. What are you talking about? The first wave was a computer. I'll never have a computer in my home. Okay. Then, I don't need the internet. I'm never going to put my credit card on the internet. If you have gray hair, you remember this, this mythology. So now, and it was funny today, I spent, of all bizarre things, for my Substack writing a poem, like in a Dr. Seuss style. I'll never use AI, right? And it goes through a typical day where your Google told you which way to drive to work. That's AI. You wanted to know the temperature. That's AI. Netflix recommended what movie to watch, and Amazon told you what to buy, and your airplane ticket was decided by this, and your credit score decides whether you can rent this or that. I mean, in a typical day, 99% of Americans are interacting with AI. So my question isn't, why aren't you using it? You are. Why aren't you benefiting from it? Why aren't you understanding how you can leverage it, how it's a force multiplier, how you can create a company with no employees, no capital, and make millions of dollars? And there are people in their 80s and 90s just figuring this out. The scary part is it sounds like I need to know how to program a computer. No, that's the great thing about AI. You just ask it a question, and it's the nicest. You become a 3-year-old. How do I do this? And it tells you. And if you still don't know, you ask again and again, and it walks you through and solves almost anything. And I'll give you an example. Recently, a guy's dog suddenly had tumors. Loves his dog. It's part of family. It's his furry child. Using just ChatGPT. He's not a doctor. He's not a scientist. Flip over the cards, do the story quickly. He figured out how to make a vaccine for his dog, and those growths went away. He saved his dog's life. There was a kid at the science fair at our high school. When I had a science fair, I made baking soda and vinegar volcano. I was real proud of it. Okay. She learned that the number 4 cause of death was being in a hospital, not what you went in for. So she figured out, why can't we make sutures that change color if there's an infection? Parents weren't doctors, weren't scientists, figured it out, watched Shark Tank enough to know, get a patent. And so by the time she got to college, she's saving a couple 100,000 people's lives a year. So the mindset is, if you want to survive, if you want to eat, if you want to be cool to your grandkids or your kids, it just takes an inquisitive mind. AI will do everything else for you.
That's fascinating. Going back a little bit to the overall notion of the second act, you've talked about the question has to change from what will I do in retirement to what will the world gain because I finally have time to do this. And so how do you help someone make that shift in their mindset, and what actually about that is seriously valuable for them to do? What's the motivation for making that change in perspective happen?
Great question. So we all started at a point where we wanted to change the world, right? We're all idealistic. The world crushes us and punches us and kicks us and steers us. But also along the way, and like I started, one of my first most impactful jobs was I wrote and was a ghostwriter for Ralph Nader. And I got to see somebody that took on the biggest corporations and changed the world with no money, with just, like the guy standing in Tiananmen Square. He just stood there and did it. But somewhere along the line, I got to feed my kids. I got to pay the mortgage. I got to figure out, me and mine. And so for me, I lost all motivation when my kids became successful and grown up and on their own. I did my job well. I want to come back in my next life as my kids. I mean, I love who they are and what they became, but that's what made me put up with all the BS in business. And at the same time, I looked around, dozens of friends became billionaires. This is insane. I wouldn't know what a millionaire was growing up, okay? And most of them were miserable when they retired. So what's missing? And what's missing is that sense of purpose that I talked about, the thing that will make you live to 100 and beyond. And so what problem do you see? What injustice in the world? And how would you tackle it? And so in the second act advantage, I tell stories of people of modest means, of no means, that are changing the world because they can. You volunteer at a dog shelter. That's nice. But you see, nobody adopts the old dogs. So you set up a charity to match old people with old dogs. Somebody did that. Amazing. Somebody else, and this is one of my favorite stories in the whole book, retired civil engineer is sitting at Jiffy Lube getting his oil changed. He's going through some ratty old magazine, National Geographic, and sees people during the rainy season in Africa, the river floods. You can't get to the village. You can't get to the school. You can't get to the hospital. So they're hanging on a rope across these raging waters. He says, I could build a Indiana Jones style rope bridge and connect the town. So for whatever reason, this retired guy gets on a plane, knows nobody in Africa, and does it. But that's where the purpose comes. He sets up a charity called Bridges to Prosperity. And he's now built hundreds of bridges across the third world, connecting millions of people and bettering their lives. You can do anything. We're one click away from everybody. So I hope we all reach a point where money doesn't have to be the motivator. But for those that have to make a living, my message is you can do well and do good at the same time. Look at Patagonia, look at Tom's Shoes, look at all these businesses that are purpose-driven. And when you do something that has a greater than yourself, two things happen. You only get joy from helping others. Every entrepreneur helps people. They don't sell things, they solve things. Sell for 1 million people, you're wealthy. Sell for 1 billion, you change the arc of history. But at this moment, when AI is absorbing everything that we do, think, and create, what you create, the thoughts you share, could be a lasting legacy for generations because you're impacting what AI is learning. And so I look at a world where the politicians to stay in office, I don't care which party, what country, want to divide us all, divide and conquer. I'm hoping in the second act advantage, people will learn how to find others that are trying to make the world better. We'll start a second act society and we can start building back that humanity and connection because that's the one thing that AI will never do. It doesn't have the creativity. It doesn't have the collaboration. You can't go to the farmer's market and talk about how do we make the world better and go for a walk in a park. I mean, those are the moments that matter. And we need to get more of them into our lives.
I fully agree that there's a lot of joy in having an impact on others that is positive. I think at a baseline, it's hard not to feel good about oneself when you've done that. But sometimes I think people really don't know how to identify their purpose. And I love there's a Yogi Berra quote that used to say, you've got to be careful if you don't know where you're going because you might not get there. And so I think it's really hard sometimes for people to evaluate what's the right option for them that will create that level of fulfillment and joy and intrinsic motivation.
So it's probably surprising to you because you know me well. Up until I started writing books, I was the least introspective person on the planet. And my first editor says, Jay, you're really competitive. I'm like, I'm not competitive. I've never played sports. I never did anything. And what my editor got me to recognize is I was competing against somebody I could never win against, myself. I always had to have a personal best. I always had to top something that I was doing. I was driven by this insatiable, very unhealthy way of looking at the world. Mom didn't hug me. Anyway, most people aren't introspective. So I have a chapter in there with these personality questions. There's no right or wrong. You rate yourself. You can also do it with Digital J online, and it'll guide you towards, do you like standing in front of a room and speaking in front of 100 people? Or does that terrify you? Do you like collaborating with people, or would you rather work on your own? Do you like building things with your hands and creating, And so it'll steer you towards what are the things, and then show you examples of other people that like those things, that build a community garden that takes empty land and makes the city community better. Because when you make a community garden, you're not just growing tomatoes, you're growing friendships, you're growing cross-generational bonds. Or maybe you're an expert in something. Now it'll steer you and show you how you can create an online course that makes money when you're sleeping. So finding out what your purpose is, the book tries to help you with that.
You're listening to What If with Leslie Grandy. If you want to activate your imagination and build your creative muscles, I've put together some free resources, including webinars, downloadable content, bonus book content, and even a GPT to help you achieve your goals. Access these free tools to start asking what if today at lesliegrandy.com/resources. So you've called retirement a dangerous myth.
Oh, yeah, it kills you.
Yeah. Can you explore a little bit about what part of it is the danger and what part is the myth? Like, where in your mind do people get it wrong?
So go to a greeting card store and it seems like people just play golf happily ever after, or pickleball, right? The myth is that you're free from all these things, but what you really didn't like about your career wasn't what you were accomplishing. It was all the friction involved to accomplish anything. When you're at the bottom of a giant company, you wonder what all those idiots do at the top. I've been a CEO and a public CEO. They're not doing anything. But there's just so much friction, and you feel relieved to get away from that. But without a why am I here? What am I doing? You'll be listless. If you don't keep growing your mind, it atrophies, just like muscles if you don't use them. If you ever broke a leg or something and were in bed for a few months, you realize just walking you have to learn again and running. Well, if you're not creating new links in your mind, one of the most effective things, and I tell you the easiest ways to do this, is learn another language. Even though AI can now allow me to talk, and I do interviews in Polish and Lithuanian and Japanese in real time now because there's simultaneous live translation. Learning a new language lights up more parts of your brain than any other activity. Or you want a really hard arcane language, learn to code even though you don't need to, because that again uses different things. But you want to feel alive. You want to challenge. And the more you do that, the more your body's responding. If you're just going to sit there, my mom, one of the brightest people I've ever met, but when she retired, she wasn't using her noodle. She wasn't physically active. And Alzheimer robbed her of the last decade of her life. She was breathing. Her heart was beating. But every day there was less of her there. And one of the last things when she was, aware enough of her condition, she was like, why can't I just die? I just want to die. So that's not what the forward that you want to look forward to. And yet I list 9 things that you can do to get 28 more years of healthy health span. And here's what's great about them. I'm not Schwarzenegger. I'm not at the gym every day. I'm not picking berries off the tree. I'm not going to tell you to eat 9,000 supplements and get transfusions from your kids like somebody that wants to live to 150 says. What can you do that takes next to no effort? And 5 of the things you can do when you're asleep. Tell you fun facts that are in the book that nobody probably taught you. If you have a dog, you have a 50% better chance of recovering from a heart attack or a stroke. Cats don't do crap, okay? No offense to cats. They're not going to save your life. Probably mom didn't tell you 2 or more orgasms a week and you'll live extra years, okay?
So is that where the 28 years came from? You cumulatively took the research for each of these
There's
tips?
a chart that shows you each of the things. So let me start with one that'll be common sense for everybody. Think of any job you had, not self-employed, but you got to go to McDonald's at this time and da-da-da. You didn't say, today I'm not going to show up till noon. Tomorrow I'm going to not show up till 5 p.m. No, a job you go to at a set time and you put on that mindset and you do it. Sleep is a job. You're going to spend a third of your life doing it. Why not do it well? Go to sleep at the same time. Don't eat anything for the few hours leading up to it. Your body will get in the habit and say, oh, now's when we shut down, and you'll go to sleep in under 5 minutes. Guaranteed. No drugs, no pill, no why did I do that? No, don't doom scroll. Don't stare at the lights. All the basic stuff. But what happens now is your body getting a refreshing sleep. Did you ever wonder why this complex machine that we're in needs a third of its time as downtime? That's like fighter jets have a third of their time downtime being repaired. It needs to repair itself. At a cellular level, at a molecular level, your body has mechanisms to stop you from ever getting cancer. A Nobel Prize was given to Japanese scientists. I talk about how you can put your body into autophagy while you're sleeping. By the way, if you're getting a good night's sleep, you're going to have more energy in the next day. You're going to release more endorphins. I talked about in my last book, look in the mirror in the morning when you're brushing your teeth, putting on makeup, shaving, and say 2 mantras. And I'm not a tree-hugging crazy person. This is out of science. Today can be better than yesterday, and I have the power to make it so. And why? Because your body and your mind doesn't know when you're lying. It believes what you say. If you say life is horrible, it'll give you a horrible life. But if you fill it with all this positivity, you exert that positivity, people make you become more popular. You're sexier to whomever you want to be attracted to. You'll close more sales. You'll become wealthier. I'd sign up for that. It takes no effort, just some consistency.
Yeah, I think what you say really resonates on a couple of levels. Sleep particularly was always a struggle for me when I was a full-time employee in a high-stress environment. The wind down still didn't shut my brain off while I was sleeping, even if I might have done that. But now, because I have very little carryover from day to day without that sort of sense of employment, I find the sleep I get may not be as long, but it's a lot more restful. And I think the idea that you're carrying your day into your sleep is widely misunderstood.
Yeah, but just biologically, you can't suddenly tell your body, sleep, right? You're not a hypnotist. But if your body has this rhythm, whether it's a circadian rhythm or not, you're going to develop your own. Up until the industrial age and lights, electricity, more than just a candle, that we could work people around the clock or whenever we said, humans and most primates slept twice during the day. You got up real early before dawn when you're your most creative and your mind's real active. And that's when I do my writing and start my painting and all of that. And then I crash, sleep for a few more hours, and then I do my other. So I don't do one set sleep thing. And it's always worked for me. I get the proper hours. I can't shut off my brain for 8 hours. It doesn't work that way. The only time I've tried meditation, I've tried everything, met the Dalai Lama. I've tried everything. Okay. I paint. You've seen my paintings. Watercolor is a medium where you can only paint when the paper's wet for those brief seconds. And once you touch it, you own it. You don't get to paint over like oil. It's a one and done. So you can work 8 hours on something. One mistake, you got to start over. So absolute concentration. So when I'm in a painting, I'm in a flow state where I don't know anything else. And so all those parts of my brain get to shut down and just live in the present, in the moment. And that to me is a gift. So listen to our body is all I'm saying. There's nothing that you're going to read in the second act Advantage that is rocket science that is going to say, I can't believe that. And I give you the footnotes and the bibliography and things so you can double check any of the facts. But we weren't taught these things for a whole bunch of reasons. Most of the United States is obese. Ask anybody in the rest of the world how they can identify an American. Okay. It isn't everybody's fault. When everybody's that way, it's systemic. The food pyramid we were raised on was a lie. The person that they hired to create it quit because they rewrote it for the lobbyists, right? And the new version is to a different bunch of lobbyists. So understanding just the basics of what to eat and what not to eat, pretty common sense stuff, changes the whole thing. I eat meat, not so much red meat anymore, but I'm not depriving myself. But wouldn't you rather live longer and healthier? Look at these people that are on so many medications. Medication treats the symptom. You have the ability to treat the cause. And it's never too late to start.
Yeah. So what I love also that you've expressed about not just the research, but the stories, the practical stories that you have in the book that show you how people have taken the second act and turned it into something purposeful. Over the course of your career, you worked with a lot of high performers. What are the common traits of the people that you've interviewed who've been able to be successful in making this happen, who might have been really high performing in their previous career or in their previous first act? So what do you see as the commonality? They might not have chosen the same path, but something about what makes them successful in the second act.
Well, I think if you have a burning desire to help, if you have a native curiosity about life, you can solve any problem. You can conquer anything. I mean, think of your favorite novel, your favorite movie, your favorite rock band, your favorite building, anything. It was made by somebody that didn't give up, somebody that wasn't stubborn. Okay. Now we have the tools to help you achieve those things quicker, faster. But some of these people just refuse to take the way the world is at face value. And in times of change, you want those people that don't go with the flow. So one story, most of the stories just make me feel like I've wasted my time on this planet because these people just are incredible. There's a woman who was busy raising a family, so she didn't get to go to college. So one day she got into college, She drove across Kansas, moved into the dorm as a freshman. The difference was she graduated high school in the 1920s, and she moved into the dorms at 94.
Wow.
She went on to graduate and go to grad school. Okay? There's another woman, and this shows you the arc of history, how we're all related. Her grandmother was born enslaved in Texas. We're not that far removed from the Civil War. And her whole life, she wanted Juneteenth to be a holiday. And politicians always gave lip services. So in her late 80s, she said, I'm going to walk from Texas to Washington, D.C. Think of like Forrest Gump style. She just started walking. And other people will ask her, why are you walking? And gets in the press. And by the time she got to the White House, it was a national holiday. I mean, if that doesn't inspire you, most people don't get to pick when their life gets devastated and disrupted. That pink slip comes out of the blue, that disease comes, whatever. So why not get prepared before that phone call that changes the rest of your days? There's one woman in the book. She's in her 50s. Husband was having an affair and divorced her. So she was divorced, in debt, depressed. Friend said, you either got to get a shrink or get a dog. She couldn't afford a shrink, so she got a dog. She needed to feed that dog. Local pet store said, we have a contest. Make a Christmas card, winning Christmas card with your pet, gets good dog food for the year. So she put her little dog, Zelda, put a Santa hat, put it in on a card, and the cover said, for Christmas, I got a dog for my husband. And then you open it up and said, good trade, huh? People laughed. Sold 1 million of them the first year. Zelda Wisdom does $50 million a year. The opportunities are out there. Every obstacle in your life is an opportunity in disguise. But now AI is your tool to help you make your goals become a reality. Right? I always was admired at all these people that made $1 billion self-made. But the arc is getting younger and younger. Every 22 hours, there's a new self-made billionaire. I mean, mommy and daddy didn't have money. They did it on their own. The newest edition just hit it at 19 thanks to using AI. So what's stopping you? A fear that you can't? Well, that's where I tell you, really go talk to old people. Ask any retired person their biggest regret in life, and it's not what they failed at. It's what they failed to try. If only I had joined the band. If only I'd moved to Hollywood. If only I had written the book. If only had I asked out that beautiful woman. So don't have regrets. It's never too late to start. And by the way, your second act will be longer than your first act. If you make it to 60, you're most likely going to make it to 90.
Yeah. So the other thing that this tells me is that a lot of the people who can take this advice already believe they have agency or control over the decision, even if they don't have the means. So your story about the woman who didn't necessarily have enough money to feed her dog created something that gave her the means to have the retirement that she enjoyed.
Necessity is the mother of invention. Some people are forced into becoming entrepreneurs, and then they'll all tell you it was the best thing that ever happened to them. You know, you have a knowledge. The reason why I call it second act advantage, when I started my first company, at 20, I thought I knew everything, as every 20-year-old does. I had a lot of ups and downs, but ended up with the lucky outcome and repeated but now you have a lifelong social network of contacts from your life. You have the wisdom that got you the gray hair, that got you where you have all these advantages. Founders that get venture capital that are 50 and older are 3 times more successful than all the other age groups. Why? Because they have that second act advantage. They've made mistakes on somebody else's dime at some other time. So you can achieve even if you haven't before. And now whatever missing gaps, I don't get social media. I never thought TikTok was for kids. There's people making their recipes, cooking, in their 70s on TikTok, making $1 million a year. There's people that are just eating food that other people made, making $1 million a year. There's a Pomeranian making $1 million a year. One of the stories, I don't know if I include in the book, but there was an 11-year-old kid. Dad gets laid off. And he's like, all these people are making money, on YouTube. I'm going to figure out how to make money on YouTube so I can help my family. I mean, the kid just wanted to help. Wasn't very successful with it, but he didn't give up. One day he sat there and like, I'm going to count to, I think it was 100,000. Just run the camera for however many days and just sit there. Well, he stuck at it, but he learned. Because when you try something, even if you fail, you don't end up where you started. You either earn or you learn. So this kid just kept on hacking at it and not giving up. And he became the first person, you know him as Mr. Beast, to make $1 billion from posting on YouTube. Wow. Like, any of us can do it or solve a problem.
What do you say to people who think there's a risk in trying some of these things? Risk to their financial security or risk to their safety? Maybe I get into some situation with AI that I feel insecure about. So how do you help people who maybe feel they have a lot at risk if they try these ideas?
Let's deal with the risk-averse person, okay? If you don't, your money's not going to last. Social Security isn't going to give you a living wage. The majority of Americans during their working years are living paycheck to paycheck. What technology has done in the winner-take-all mega companies that we've now created is we have 30,000 people in the US, and I love capitalism, that own 90% of all cash, all property, all buildings, all stock. So you're making 6 figures and feeling like you're still on a hamster wheel struggling, making 7 figures and feeling like you're on a hamster wheel struggling. It isn't you. The middle class has been eviscerated. So the bigger risk is not trying to find a supplemental side hustle, find another thing, make the world better and safer. What happens even if you have your millions of dollars? There's a reason why, I won't out people, but people are now buying large islands and building bunkers and $500 million ships. And most of the wealthy have a second visa or second passport now that if society falls apart, they'll up and be on a plane before the masses come. So that's the risk I'd worry about. I'd also worry about if I'm not using my brain, if I'm not engaged socially with others, if I don't have a purpose, if I don't have structure, I will deteriorate. I will lose who I am. I will lose my personality. Now let's compare that to the risk of you can launch businesses with no money. My last book, which I think we talked about last time, I took a homeless immigrant, mentored him, and went from homeless to self-made millionaire. Gave him no cash, no business introductions. So you don't have to spend money to build these businesses, okay? You don't need inventory and employees. That's what AI is great for. It'll build your sales funnel. It'll build your website for free. It'll do it in an hour. Google just launched a tool that'll make all your ads for free, and they are the best ads in the world. Why? Because at that moment, they know exactly who your audience is and what type of ads they click on and what color and where the button has to be for whatever your target is, because they get 90% of all ad dollars. So they've now opened the kimono and giving you the secret sauce. As far as you have to be, intelligent and worry about what information you put online. But people are getting scammed out of billions of dollars a month in the US by people pretending to be your friends or your lover or pretending to be your bank, or almost the number of scams are unbelievable. There's a new scam for podcasts. They look at people that are on podcasts and they pretend to be a more famous podcast. And they say, yeah, you can be on, I won't name a name, XYZ show. And then they set up, we got to do the technical setup before we go on. And the whole technical setup was getting into your computer and emptying your bank accounts while you think you're waiting in a waiting room to be on a podcast. So the scammers will get you whether you participate in taking agency on yourself. So you can believe in fate. You can believe someone else has control. And I'm not going to argue with you. But I don't have that faith that the world was set up to protect me. The world was set up to take care of me as I get older and more infirm. Because the world looks like it has a whole lot of problems it hasn't addressed. I don't want to do this anymore. I did not want to write another book. Truth on this one. When I was running an AI company, I would play with everybody's AI and I would ask them every month questions that they can't know the answer to because I wanted to see how the hamster wheels turn inside. And because I'm a known person, I asked, what book should Jay Samit write next? And the outline of the second act advantage was basically what popped out. I go, holy, that would have never occurred to me. This is a huge problem that I'm uniquely qualified to help people through. And I immediately called the editor of my last book. I said, does this make sense? And I go, there's nothing like it out there to help people. Get it done. And I'm a better writer than what AI can write today. So I wrote it. But when I finished it, I put it into the various AIs and I said, I want this to be the definitive book to help people at this moment in history. What's missing? Because we all have blind spots. And the various AI suggested things that weren't in the book that I thought didn't need to be in. But there was one topic that it talked about the emotional toll of retirement. Gray divorce is the single rising case of divorce. You hear people getting divorced in their 70s and 80s. That sounds insane to us, okay? But staring at people for a decade going, what do you want for dinner? No, what do you want? So I felt a moral obligation. I've resigned off of every board. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm lucky. I've had a blessed life. I've spent the past decade paying it forward. But when there's a struggling company that comes to me and I feel a moral obligation, they're solving a giant problem like greenfield robotics. Let's take all the pesticides and herbicides out of food. Let's make little robots that cut the weeds. I felt a moral obligation to see that they got funded and launched because if it works, we don't get cancer. Farmers don't get cancer. And all the pesticides don't go down the Mississippi and kill all the fish in the Gulf of Mexico. I wouldn't be able to sleep soundly if I knew I had the ability to help millions and not do it. So they just called noblesse oblige, right? You have a moral obligation. If life's been good to you, yeah, I worked my ass off, but I got lucky. The hardest working people are people that walk 5 miles a day to get water for their families. There's 1 billion of those that are water insecure. Bill Gates, I talk about Bill in the book. Bill's been very good to me in my life. When he retired, he wasn't the happiest camper, won't go into why. But a friend egged him on and says, you know, Bill, there's always going to be a richest guy. Nobody's going to remember you. Which, when you're that successful, really sticks the needle in. He said, why don't you do something nobody's ever done? Nobody ever cured a disease. So polio, we had a vaccine, but nobody figured out how to get to places up in the jungle, places don't have refrigeration. So Bill started on that journey with his foundation. Fast forward, Bill Gates has been retired 25 years. You know what he accomplished? He didn't solve his first goal, but he cut childhood mortality in half globally, saving 25 million lives a year. At a time when most countries aren't reproducing themselves and the planet is aging, saving children is a hugely important thing. No European country is replacing itself. The US isn't. Japan sells more adult diapers than kid diapers. Korea, China, all in trouble. I think that's a pretty great retirement thing to do instead of getting, $500 million yacht.
That's interesting. My last question is, fast forward a couple of decades and you have your first generation of AI native people retiring, right? They'll have been in the workforce where AI will be integrated in their jobs. They'll have new experiences that this creates for employees and companies. And now they're on their own. They're hitting that retirement age. What do you think will be different for the AI native generation when they retire?
It's funny. I have a fantasy one page in the future in my book on, what a typical day would be like. First of all, you'll be able to live healthier over the next decade. Cancer will no longer be a thing bothering people. Okay. Most of our communicable diseases will be solved. Google figured out how to fold all the proteins that we know and a bunch that we don't know. So you'll be independent longer. Your self-driving car can take you around. I've had one for a decade now, and it's a much better driver than I, the human. So I would assume the people found a better use of their time than drudgery. Google has this experiment that 20% of employees' time is working on things that only they care about. So pet projects, and some of them turn into great things, and most of them are just, it was the person's pet project. I don't have the wisdom to see all the pieces. One of the pieces that I started focusing on a number of years ago is Uber and Lyft drivers are the first workers that worked for AI. They never met a boss. They applied to an algorithm. They get their customer from an algorithm. They get paid by an algorithm. They get routed by a different algorithm. They're truly working for AI. Now, AI is now going to be routing vehicles that do not need drivers. It's the number one job on tax returns is truck driver and driving. So what happens to all that class of people? Your large consulting firms, your law firms, your accountants. AI does that. If you have a job where you're sitting and looking at a computer screen, the computer doesn't need you to sit there anymore. Okay? If you're moving one set of data to make it so other people can understand it, or you're creating graphics to go with the thing, 90% of what we now read is created by AI. So I'm hoping that I can be a drop of water and start a ripple. The people, as they get more time, will focus that time on making a better world for everybody. Because I never understood greed. I never understood. There was a BS a while ago that a bunch of billionaires signed a pledge that when they died, 300 richest people on the planet agreed their money's gone to charity. And I say it was BS because I said to myself, I know the kind of personalities, and I know many of them personally, they believe they're smarter than the next guy, and they have every reason to believe that, okay? So why would they believe that somebody else would do more good with that money than their brain could do with that money to do good? Which means that they'd be wanting to put it to use while they're alive, right? Like the Daniel Carnegies and other people did that built libraries for every town or whatever they thought was the best use. And of those 300 people that pledged to give all their money away, only 15 haven't reneged the pledge, right? Made good headlines. So I'd like to see regular people using superhuman tools to solve problems that have plagued us for generations. Like the guy building the bridge. We all now can solve little inconveniences to giant things. Yes, many jobs will be destroyed. But I'm not so old that I'm from the silent movie era. But I've often watched Chaplin working in the factory, which seems absolutely inhumane. And later I worked with the big three automakers and they gave me a tour of a factory where a stamping machine comes down and slams a flat piece of metal, aluminum, whatever, and bends it into the car part. But to make sure that human doesn't chop their hand off because the force that comes down, they have safety things on their wrists. So when the thing goes down, it lifts the people's hands up like a marionette. And I just couldn't imagine spending 40 hours a week for 40 years physically being a marionette. That isn't employment. That's suffering. So now you have factories that have no people. You have near me a McDonald's that has no people. There's a Starbucks that has no people. Okay? All these jobs are automated. I do not believe government or anybody's coming to rescue with universal basic income. That will not work. So what are we going to do? Let's start getting together. And if we have the time and we have the means and we have the connectivity, make the world better. What could be a better use of time or create better art? That's the amazing. You now have the tools of production. No, there are no gatekeepers. There's no, if I only had the money. 90% you don't need the money for.
If people would like to learn more about Digital J as well as Real World J and find out more about sort of your art and all that you bring into the Second Act Advantage, what's the best way to do that?
I'm the easiest person to find on the internet. So you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you buy the book, you get the free Digital J with it. If you buy it before it ships on May 5th, just reach out to me through any of those channels. I don't need receipts. I trust you. I'll send you the link. If you're doing great things in your second act, let me know. So through my Substack, JAYSAMIT.substack.com, I can broadcast to the world the great things you're doing. Every Sunday, I try to publish an uplifting story so you can start your week off saying, here's somebody that did something unbelievable. I'm trying to think some of the ones. One guy loved his grandma who used to give good advice, and he thought she was so good. He set her up sitting in Central Park at a booth and would wheel her there, and she'd give advice to everybody. And then she passed, and he missed her. And he said, well, there's other grandmas. So he set up a whole way so these grandmas are just giving advice to people. There's people that have trained dogs because they have great sense, to find missing dogs. So when your dog runs away, here's a great solution. A team goes in and can smell that scent of where that dog went off to impede. I mean, so many minor tweaks that enrich the world. So let me hear from you. It's my favorite thing. I will tell you, if you have a book in you, and Leslie, I commend you for getting it out of you. If you have a book in you, it can be the most rewarding thing you can do, because it's a selfish act of saying, I have some knowledge that I believe someone else can benefit from. But it's a selfless act to then figure out, how do I market the living daylights out of it? But I've made billions for companies. I've built huge companies, and I've never gotten an email from somebody on board going, hey, Jay, thanks for all you do. Yet I've heard from dentists in Pakistan and students in Ethiopia and the four corners of the earth that I go, how did they get my books? I don't know, but it makes my day. It makes me feel like I am participating. I'm not just sitting by myself. My time hasn't passed. I still have something to share. And if nothing else, I can be an example for my grandkids growing up of what you can do in a lifetime. Because my lifetime's been just the greatest trip imaginable. I couldn't have imagined it.
It's so wonderful that you share that. And what I encourage people to do is definitely to follow you on all the social platforms. I find your art to be so uplifting and inspiring and provocative and all the things that social media isn't necessarily. So it always is lovely when it comes across my feed that I get to see one of your places. I love that you've animated your art through AI.
Well, AI did that. So yeah, not to cut you off. One of the things that led my art down this path is during the pandemic, I really started to wrestle with, because I wasn't busy flying around, with the demons of everything that I created, all these technologies, social media. I won't do the me. I always thought I was helping and making the world better. I never saw the dark side of how other people could use these tools. So my artwork is me wrestling that guilt, what we've gained, what we've lost, with humor, with pop art, so that it lures people in. And probably my favorite night was what you talked about, my first art show, and I've done several since, where I show up at the gallery at night. It's opening night of an art show, prestigious gallery in New York. And there's hundreds of people in line. And I realized nobody knows what the artist looks like. So for the first hour, when they're looking at 40-some paintings and they're laughing and they're pulling people around, I get to eavesdrop on the conversation because they don't know I'm the artist. So I get to honestly hear people's reaction, because it's the only time in your life you get to do that. I got to be anonymous. And it was like, they like me. They like my art. Because I just paint to stay sane, because some of our life makes no sense. I mean, and we never stop to look at the insanity. I did one painting that was very well known as a woman in various stages of crying, basically saying, Alexa, turn my feelings off. We've lost so much. Yes, we've gained, but hopefully with this book and with your help spreading the word, we can help people get some of that humanity back into humans.
Well, I really appreciate the generosity of your time. I love your contributions to the dialogue around retirement. I think it's time. You're right. It's time for the message to get out. So thank you so much for joining me today, Jay.
Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to What If with Leslie Grandy. If you're interested in learning more about creative leadership, or you're just looking for a way to build your creative self-confidence and agency, check out my book, Creative Velocity, at lesliegrandy.com/book and start turning your ideas into action.